The first time someone knocked on the back wall of my grandmother's storeroom, I was holding a pen over a contract that would have sold the last thing my family owned for less than half what the land was worth. I had already signed the first page. The buyer's lawyer was coming at 8 the next morning. The bank had given me 30 days to settle the arrears on the property. I had 26,411 rand left to my name, more than 70,000 in legal bills, and exactly 0 companies willing to hire the woman whose name had been connected to a procurement scandal. My name is Nandi Zulu. I was 28 years old, South African, broke, angry, and beginning to understand that being innocent did not automatically make you safe. 6 months earlier, I had been a procurement and financial risk analyst in Durban. I was good at it. Not exciting good. Not motivational speaker good. I was the boring kind of good that saved companies money. I knew supplier pricing. I knew inventory turnover. I knew when transport contracts had too many unexplained fees. I knew how to look at 1,000 ordinary transactions and notice the 12 that did not belong. That was how I found Musa's suppliers. Musa was our finance director. Charismatic. Well-connected. Always smiling. The sort of executive who remembered the names of senior managers, children, while somehow never learning the names of the cleaners. 3 suppliers were charging our company almost 50% above normal market rates for basic warehouse goods. Different companies, different addresses, different directors, same accountant. The money trail eventually led to Musa's brother-in-law. I reported it. Musa thanked me for being thorough. 2 weeks later, investigators found unauthorized supplier changes made using my account. 3 weeks later, I was suspended. 5 weeks later, I was fired. My lawyers eventually proved that someone else had accessed my login remotely. That should have fixed everything. It did not. The accusation had already traveled farther than the correction ever would. Musa kept his job. I became the woman companies were afraid to hire. Then my grandmother died. She left me a small craft shop attached to an old family property in northern Zululand. The place had been in our family for decades. It had cracked plaster, a leaking roof, old wooden shelves, and one storeroom so dark that I refused to enter it without turning on every light first. It was also behind on payments. By the time I arrived there, I was exhausted enough to sell it. That was where I sat at 11:43 at night, preparing to sign away my last asset. Then came 3 slow knocks. From inside the storeroom. I stopped breathing. There was no rear door in that room. I knew because I had spent 6 days measuring the property for the sale. There was brick behind that wall. The knock came again. 3 taps. Slow. Patient. I picked up the heaviest object near me. Unfortunately, that object was an old wooden receipt spike. If the ghost had been aggressive, I would have been in serious trouble. Who is there? Silence. Then a woman answered. The language sounded familiar. Zulu, but older. The rhythm was strange. I moved closer. The brick wall was gone. In its place stood a wooden door. I stared at it. I touched it. Solid. I should have run. Instead, I opened it. Warm night air touched my face. The fluorescent light from the shop spilled onto red earth. Beyond the doorway was open land, beneath a dark sky. I saw fires in the distance. Cattle. Round homesteads. Grassland. No road. No electricity. No power lines. No petrol station. No cell tower. Standing 10 meters away was a young woman holding a clay water vessel. She stared at my jeans. I stared at her clothes. Then she looked over my shoulder at the electric light and almost dropped the vessel. I shut the door. Opened it again. Still there. I checked my phone. Modern date. Modern time. No signal beyond the threshold. I walked outside through the normal front door and circled the building. Brick wall. I returned inside. Wooden door. That was when I considered the possibility that stress had finally broken something important in my brain. The young woman knocked. I opened the door again. Eventually, through a painful mixture of gestures, older Zulu words, modern Zulu words, and both of us repeating ourselves far too loudly, I learned her name. Lindy. She was 23. She had been traveling with relatives along a trade route when one of their cattle strayed. She followed it and saw light where no house should have been. My light. She thought I was either a spirit, a foreign trader, or a woman with extremely strange taste in clothing. I asked what year it was. That went badly. After enough questions, I realized I was looking at some version of the Zulu kingdom roughly 200 years before my own time. Not exactly my history. Some names and events did not match what I remembered from school. That turned out to matter later. At that moment, I mostly wanted to know whether I was dreaming. Lindy wanted to know about my shelves. She pointed at a sewing needle, then at a stainless steel knife, then at a packet of salt. To me, the storeroom contained cheap household goods. To her, it looked like a merchant's treasure room. I gave her 10 needles, salt, strong thread, and one small knife. The total modern cost was less than 150 rand. She tried to give me a bracelet. I refused. She frowned. Then she offered a small metal ornament from her pouch. I refused again. She became offended. That was my first lesson in the past. Charity was not always kindness if the person in front of you wanted trade. So I accepted the ornament. The doorway vanished shortly before sunrise. I was left staring at a brick wall, holding a small lump of yellow metal. At 9:15 that morning, I drove to Durban instead of meeting the buyer's lawyer. The first dealer thought the object was decorative brass. The second tested it, then tested it again. It was a gold-rich alloy. After refining fees, the metal value came to 22,300 rand. I sat in my car, staring at the payment notification. I had given away goods worth less than 150 rand. I had received more than 22,000. I did what any responsible financial analyst would do after discovering a doorway connecting 2 centuries. I opened a spreadsheet. By lunchtime, I had columns for modern cost, historical scarcity, weight, transport difficulty, legal risk, resale options, spoilage, social impact, and possible demand. By 3, I understood the real opportunity. The doorway was impossible. But my power was not magical. There were simply 2 economies, separated by 200 years. 2 economies with completely different definitions of cheap. And if there was one thing Musa had accidentally taught me, it was that enormous amounts of money could hide inside small differences nobody bothered to examine. The door returned the following night at 8:17. I know because I had been staring at the wall since 7. Lindy arrived an hour later with her father. His name was Busa. He looked at me, then at the electric light, then at the stainless steel cooking pot on my counter. He asked Lindy something. She answered. He laughed so hard he had to sit down. What did she say? Lindy smiled. I told him you are a great trader. That sounds positive. She also told him you gave away valuable goods because you did not know their worth. Less positive. Busa had brought payment. Cattle. Specifically, he wanted to give me rights to 2 animals from his herd. I had no idea what I was supposed to do with historical cattle. I could not exactly bring them through the doorway and list them on a modern agricultural marketplace. So we negotiated. Badly. Then better. Salt mattered. Needles mattered more than I expected. Strong thread. factory-made knives, cooking pots, storage containers, simple hand tools, durable cloth. Mirrors caused problems because people kept staring into them instead of discussing prices. Soap had to be introduced carefully. The first scented bar made one old man suspicious that I was trying to make him smell like flowers as part of a trick. I learned quickly. I avoided anything I did not understand medically. I refused guns entirely. That turned out not to be a moral choice alone. The doorway rejected modern firearms. A kitchen knife passed. A farm blade passed. A hunting rifle did not. It simply stopped at the threshold, as if the air had turned solid. I took that as evidence that whatever created the doorway had better safety controls than my old company. My first proper shipment cost 8,600 rand. Salt, needles, tools, cloth, pots, thread, containers, agricultural equipment. Nothing glamorous. Busa stared at the goods for a long time, then asked what I wanted. I said gold. He said no. I expected bargaining. Instead, he explained that gold was useful, but it was not the only measure of wealth. Cattle mattered. Trade relationships mattered. Obligations mattered. Access mattered. A family with many animals and no trusted partners could still become vulnerable. My spreadsheet understood price. It did not understand all of that. Lindy did. She could remember the value of a cow offered 12 days earlier by a trader she had met once. She knew which families needed grain, which ones had hides, which ones produced strong baskets, which traders exaggerated, which families could be trusted to deliver on an agreement made with no paper at all. I showed her double entry bookkeeping. She studied the page, then looked at me. So you write the same truth twice because you do not trust your memory? Yes. She nodded seriously. That is wise. The next evening, she created a system using beads to track 6 categories of trade. She was faster than my calculator. That became an argument lasting several years. I called it proper accounting. She called mine slow accounting. Within 3 weeks, I stopped thinking of Lindy as someone helping me. She was my partner. I handled modern prices, logistics, cash, and risk. She understood the past. We created a shared value system. I converted goods into modern rand equivalents. Lindy converted local goods into cattle and grain units. Then we used actual trade history from her network to negotiate. It was not perfect. It was much better than me arriving with a calculator and assuming everyone before electronic banking had been financially stupid. My first 50,000 rand became 180,000, then 400,000, then 700,000. I paid the arrears on my grandmother's property 12 days before the bank deadline. The same bank officer who had spoken to me as if repossession were a moral lesson suddenly started calling me MS Zulu. I did not explain where the money came from. I also stopped selling old goods almost immediately. That path was too risky. Anything genuinely historical could create questions I did not want asked. Instead, I discovered something better. Production. The people on Lindy's side made beautiful ordinary things. Baskets, leather goods, wooden serving pieces, woven mats, beadwork, practical items made by hand. I began commissioning new pieces specifically for modern buyers. Not sacred items, not royal objects, not anything culturally restricted. Household goods, design work, functional art. My first boutique buyer in Durban took 26 pieces. My total cost, including transport and packaging, was 19,000 rand. Revenue was 112,000. When I told Lindy, she stared at me. People paid that much. Yes. For baskets. Yes. She thought about that. Then asked, are people in your time bad at making baskets? I laughed for almost a minute. What changed everything was scale. Buying retail made no sense. I started buying wholesale. Bulk salt. Bulk cloth. Tools directly from distributors. Pots by the pallet. Containers from manufacturers. My cost per unit collapsed. Historical trade volume increased. Modern margins grew. Then I discovered something even more important. The goods I brought were not merely being consumed. They changed productivity. A better tool meant less labor. Better storage meant less waste. Less waste meant more surplus. More surplus meant more trade. More trade meant more demand. Lindy noticed first. You bring things that make people able to buy more things later. That sentence stayed with me. I opened a new spreadsheet. I named it compounding. Within 5 months, I had enough money to buy a used delivery van. Then another. Then I rented warehouse space. Then I realized I was paying someone else to own the thing I needed most. So I bought a small warehouse. My grandmother's little shop remained the doorway. The warehouse became the business. I hired 3 modern employees. They thought our products came through a private rural network. That was technically true. Extremely incomplete. Revenue passed 10 million rand. Then 15. Then 20. Musa finally heard about me. He sent a message. Congratulations. Glad you found something that suits you. I stared at it. I knew what he meant. Crafts. Little shop. Woman who had failed in serious business. He had no idea I was generating margins his company could only dream of. He thought I had gone backwards. I had actually discovered an economy with no competition from anyone alive in my century. Then, one evening, Lindy brought me a large bundle of grain records. Prices had risen sharply in 3 areas. Families were selling cattle earlier than normal. I understood the pattern immediately. When households sell productive assets to cover basic food, hardship is no longer temporary. Something bigger was beginning. For the first time, the doorway offered me a choice that had nothing to do with becoming rich. I could profit from scarcity. Or I could use the money I had made to prevent it from becoming disaster. The first time I made more than 1 million rand in a month, I celebrated by repairing the roof. Lindy said this proved modern people had no imagination. If I had your money, she told me, I would buy cattle. I own a warehouse. A warehouse cannot have calves. It also cannot walk away. She considered that. Bad cattle do. By then, our operation was becoming difficult to hide because success creates its own noise. Modern designers wanted more stock. Historical artisans wanted predictable orders. Traders arrived more often. My grandmother's shop became known on the other side as a strange night market. Different people had different theories about me. Some thought I was a foreign merchant. Some thought I had access to a distant kingdom. Some thought I was connected to spirits. One elderly woman insisted I simply belonged to people who lived somewhere very far south and dressed badly. I encouraged that explanation. The historical side had one rule I refused to break. I would not turn people into cheap labor for modern buyers. If a modern customer paid more because a piece was rare, complex, or beautiful, the people producing it received more too. Not equal to the modern retail price. That would have destroyed local pricing, but enough that increased demand improved their lives. Lindy handled most of those negotiations. Her father stopped introducing her as his daughter. He started introducing her as the person who set terms. That mattered. Women who had previously participated in trade indirectly began bringing information to her. Grain, craft output, leather, household needs, livestock. Lindy built a network I could never have built alone. On the modern side, I brought in my cousin Tandy. Tandy had spent 12 years working in logistics. She had a gift for knowing when somebody was lying about a delivery date. She also had no patience for mystery. When I finally showed her the doorway, she stared through it for 10 seconds. Then looked at me. Do they have customs? That is your first question. We are moving commercial goods across a border. It is also 200 years ago. That does not answer my question. That was when I knew I could trust her. Tandy became responsible for modern logistics. Lindy handled historical trade relationships. I handled capital. The three of us stopped building a craft company. We started building an economic machine. Our packaging supplier was charging us nearly R500,000 a month. The owner wanted to retire. So I bought 70% of the company. Our costs fell. Their business gained guaranteed volume. Profits helped finance another acquisition. Transport was expensive. I bought into a regional transport operator. Warehousing costs were rising. I bought more warehouse property. Certain metal goods were difficult to source consistently. I acquired a stake in a small manufacturer. That was the point when money changed shape for me. At first, money had been survival. Then income. Then savings. Now it became capital. Capital bought assets. Assets produced cash. Cash purchased more assets. The process compounded. I began understanding why extremely wealthy people often appeared to become richer without doing anything dramatic. They had crossed a threshold. Their money was no longer waiting for instructions. Their assets were producing new money automatically. That was the financial equivalent of becoming overpowered. Not having enough cash to buy an expensive car. Having enough ownership that the systems around you started paying you. Our group crossed 50 million rand in annual revenue. Then 100 million. Then 300 million. Musa noticed when one of my logistics companies outbid his employer for a regional distribution contract. He called me. I did not know you were behind Nandi Holdings. You never asked. You are growing quickly. That almost sounded like a compliment. He laughed. You always were ambitious. No. I had always been careful. But I did not correct him. A few months later, Musa's company announced plans for a major distribution hub near my grandmother's property. Their preferred access route crossed land I had recently bought. They offered me 4 million rand. I refused. 5 million. I refused. Musa called. Nandi, do not become emotional about land. The irony almost made me choke. My grandmother's shop is not for sale. We do not need the shop. You need the corridor. Yes. Then redesign it. That will cost us 18 million rand. Then the corridor costs 18 million. Silence. I remembered that silence. It was the same silence from the day I had shown him the fake supplier trail. The silence of a powerful man deciding whether I was useful or inconvenient. Nandi, business is built on relationships. You taught me that. Over the next 2 months, a supplier canceled. A bank suddenly delayed a credit facility. A warehouse application attracted extra questions. 2 companies that had happily worked with us stopped returning calls. Tandy brought me the pattern. This is coordinated. I already knew. Musa was using relationships. A year earlier, that would have terrified me. Instead, I opened our liquidity report. We had 192 million rand in cash and short-term assets. Total debt across the group was 28 million. The credit facility Musa thought he had threatened was almost irrelevant. I canceled it myself. Then I started buying. Not revenge. Assets. A supplier dropped us. I bought its competitor. A transport operator became available. I bought it. Then something more interesting appeared. Musa's company had expanded aggressively. Several new sites were underperforming. Fuel costs were hurting margins. Debt was spread across multiple lenders. One bank wanted less exposure. I knew because finance people talk, especially when you have money. I met the lender. I purchased a discounted participation in one of the company's secured loans. Then another lender sold me a larger piece. Nandi stared at the papers. You are buying Musa's debt. I am buying performing debt at a discount. You are buying Musa's debt while smiling. The smile is free. He continued trying to pressure my suppliers. I continued quietly becoming one of the people his company owed money to. Meanwhile, the grain problem in the past became serious. Prices rose. Families began selling animals too cheaply. We had enough money to import huge amounts of modern food through the doorway. I refused. Dumping cheap grain would save people today and possibly destroy local farmers tomorrow. Instead, we bought existing local reserves first. We financed better storage. We paid traders to move grain from surplus areas. Only when local supply could not cover minimum needs did we introduce outside food. Our margins dropped. Our trade network became stronger. Lindy watched me reviewing the numbers one night. You are losing money. Yes. Are you worried? Yes. Will you stop? No. She smiled. Good. I looked at her. That is easy for you to say. No, it is easy because I know something you forgot. What? If everyone becomes poor, who will buy from us next year? I laughed. It was capitalism explained with alarming clarity. Then, exactly 11 months after Musa had tried to cut me off from suppliers, his company's lenders called an emergency restructuring meeting. He arrived expecting to negotiate covenant relief. I was already sitting at the table. Musa stopped walking. That was all. No shouting. No dramatic confrontation. One step simply did not become the next. He looked at me. Then at the bank representatives. Then at the documents in front of me. What is she doing here? One of the lenders answered. Nandi Holdings controls 31% of the senior secured exposure represented today. Musa turned back to me. You bought our debt. Some of it. His face changed. For months, he had treated me like a troublesome former employee who had become unusually successful. That morning, he finally understood the scale difference. While he had been trying to interfere with my suppliers and banking, I had quietly become one of the people who could decide whether his company received more time. I had imagined that moment many times. I expected triumph. What I mostly felt was calm, with a small amount of satisfaction. I am not pretending otherwise. The meeting was ugly. Their company had overexpanded. Several sites were losing money. Internal controls were weak. Worst of all, two of the inflated suppliers I had identified more than a year earlier were still receiving business. One had raised prices again. The lenders wanted asset sales, new controls, reduced debt, changes in management. Musa wanted 12 more months. Then he made the mistake that finished him. He blamed historic procurement problems caused by former staff. Meaning me. I opened my laptop. I would like that statement entered accurately into the minutes. He looked at me. What? You are stating that former employees caused the procurement problems. Nandi, this is not personal. It became personal when you used my name. One of the lenders asked whether I had evidence relevant to the restructuring. I did. Nothing magical. Nothing dramatic. Logs. Supplier ownership records. Pricing comparisons. Approval chains. Emails. Login timestamps. Remote access data. And one link investigators had missed. Payments from one supplier had helped fund property connected to Musa's brother-in-law. I found it because procurement fraud rarely looks like one giant theft. It hides inside normality. Small transactions. Repeated exceptions. Friendly companies. Slightly inflated invoices. Relationships nobody questions. Musa fought back. He was not stupid. He argued that the records were incomplete. He accused me of conflict of interest. He suggested I was using the restructuring to settle an old grievance. That was clever because part of me did want revenge. So I did something he did not expect. I recused myself from the decision about his employment. My representative voted according to the independent forensic investigation. The board suspended Musa 3 days later. The investigation expanded. The company eventually issued a public correction regarding the old allegations against me. My name was cleared. Musa lost his position. Several directors were removed. Civil claims followed. But I did not destroy the company. Hundreds of innocent people worked there. Drivers, warehouse staff, cleaners, finance clerks, people with children and rent and school fees. I supported the restructuring. Unprofitable assets were sold. Bad supplier contracts were canceled. New management came in. The company survived. Musa did not remain part of it. The person who had once controlled whether I could earn a salary had become one troubled line item in a portfolio large enough that I did not need to think about him. That was the strangest part of revenge. By the time I finally had enough power to destroy him financially, destroying him felt unnecessary. He had made himself irrelevant. That evening, I returned to the shop. Lindy was waiting. So the man who harmed you is gone? Yes. Are you happy? Yes. She waited. I sighed. Not as much as I expected. She nodded like she had known this months ago. Then you wanted freedom more than punishment. I looked at her. When did you become wise? When you became rich enough to become foolish. There she was. My emotional support. Revenue crossed 1 billion rand the following year. Nandi Holdings owned stakes in transport, packaging, light manufacturing, storage, agriculture, property, and design. The original heritage business was only one division. My personal wealth became difficult to calculate because most of it was equity. Depending on valuations, I was worth more than 3 billion rand. The woman who had once been terrified of missing a 70,000 rand payment now had banks competing to offer me credit I did not need. My mother asked why I still drove the same Toyota. I told her it worked. Tandy said that was unacceptable billionaire behavior. Lindy asked what billionaire meant. I tried to explain. She listened. So you own many cattle that cannot walk. I gave up. By every measure that had mattered to me 2 years earlier, I had won. No employer could destroy my livelihood. No bank could casually threaten my home. No supplier could shut down my business. No executive could decide whether I deserved a future. I had become financially overpowered for the world that had once frightened me. Then Lindy brought me a coin. It was dark metal. Heavy. Marked with a circle crossed by 3 curved lines. I had seen that symbol before. Carved beneath the old floorboards of my grandmother's shop. Where did you get this? Traders from the Northeast. How far? They would not say. Why did they give it to you? They asked about you. My stomach tightened. What did you tell them? That you are bad at counting without your glowing machine. Lindy. She smiled. Very little. 2 days later, I was sitting in my Durban office when reception called. There is a woman here asking to see you. Name? Asha. Appointment? No, she says you will recognize what she brought. Asha entered wearing a cream suit. She sat opposite me, then placed a dark metal coin on the desk. Circle. 3 lines. Exactly the same. My whole body went cold. She looked around my office. 3 billion rand, she said. I stared at her. She smiled. Very impressive. The way she said it told me immediately that she was not impressed. Then she asked the question that made everything I had achieved suddenly feel much smaller. How long did it take you to find your first door? I did not answer. Asha leaned back, as if we were discussing an ordinary investment. She was from Zanzibar. Her family had lived around East African trade routes for generations. She knew what my doorway was. More importantly, she knew my grandmother. Not personally, by reputation. Your grandmother traded through that door for years, Asha said. She never told me. That does not mean she did not know. Why did she stop? Asha smiled slightly. That is one of the reasons I came. I hated people who answered questions with better questions. Asha explained the larger world slowly. There were other doors. Not dozens. Hundreds. Maybe more. Some connected different locations. Some connected different centuries. Some opened once a week. Some once a year. Some during specific weather. Some had been controlled by families for generations. Some had been lost. Africa held some of the oldest known routes. Zanzibar. North African ports. West African kingdoms. Old inland trading cities. Routes through the Horn of Africa. Desert networks. River markets. Places that modern history remembered only as ruins or names in books. For generations, certain families had done what I had discovered accidentally. They traded across scarcity. But serious operators did not merely move gold and tools. Asha actually called that beginner trade. I disliked her for 12 minutes. The old houses moved agricultural knowledge, mineral rights, plant varieties, production methods, transport access, land, debt, craftsmanship, long-duration ownership, ideas. Some had been compounding wealth for 200 years, others for longer. My 3 billion rand fortune, which had made me terrifyingly wealthy in my old world, barely qualified me for their lowest direct tier. I asked how rich the largest families were. Asha shrugged. Depends what you call ownership. Modern assets. Some control tens of billions of dollars. Some. Yes. And the largest. She looked at me. Do not think in individuals. That answer was worse. I walked to the window. Durban spread below me. Roads. Warehouses. Businesses. Property. Everything that had once looked enormous. I had become the biggest fish in my world. Then someone had shown me the wall of the pond. I laughed. Asha raised an eyebrow. What is funny? I finally understand Lindy. Who? My partner. I turned around. I have many cattle that cannot walk. Asha stared at me. I decided not to explain. The hidden network had no dramatic official name. Different groups called it different things. Asha simply called it the exchange. It was not one company. It was a network of settlement agreements, guarantees, trade rules, relationships between people operating across impossible markets. There were rules against introducing certain weapons, rules against catastrophic political interference, rules against deliberately creating large historical disruptions. Rules about secrecy. Rules about settlement. Who enforced them? People wealthy enough that enforcement is cheaper than conflict, Asha said. I understood that immediately. That was the first time the exchange felt real. I asked why they cared about me. My balance sheet is tiny compared with yours. Correct. Thank you. But your growth rate is not. I said nothing. You built your modern group in roughly 2 years. More importantly, your historical trade network operates without you. Because Lindy runs it. Exactly. Asha leaned forward. Most new door holders create dependence. They become the only supplier of something valuable. That gives them huge margins. It also makes their whole system fragile. You created counterparties. I thought about the bead ledgers. The women who reported grain conditions. The artisans. The traders. Our refusal to force exclusive agreements. That matters. More than your net worth. That frightened me. If the old houses valued what we had built, someone might try to control it. What happens if I refuse to join? Nothing. I do not believe you. You should. You are not important enough yet. It was such a clean insult that I almost respected it. Then she added, but people know your route is active. Refusing the exchange will not make them forget. That was the new limitation. Money had solved almost every threat from my old life. It could not make this wider financial world disappear. Asha invited me to attend a regional exchange meeting in Nairobi. Observer status only. I asked how much it cost. Nothing. That means it is expensive. She laughed properly this time. Before leaving, she placed the dark coin back on my desk. One more thing. What? Your grandmother did not stop because she ran out of money. I felt my heartbeat change. Why did she stop? I do not know. You came here because you thought I did. Yes. What do you know? That her network was strong. Then she closed it voluntarily. That night, I told Lindy everything. I expected concern. She smiled. How rich are these people? Very. Richer than you. Much. Her smile grew. Why are you pleased? Because you have become unbearable since you became the richest person you know. I stared at her. She patted my shoulder. This will be good for you. The Nairobi meeting was held inside a modern office, building so ordinary that I checked the address twice. No secret temple. No underground vault. No dramatic robes. The receptionist offered me tea. There were 14 people in the room. Investment managers. Lawyers. Family representatives. Commodity specialists. 2 people whose roles were never explained. Nobody talked about personal net worth. They did not need to. Their power appeared in the scale of what they discussed. A shipping company, established using profits generated before the country where it now operated existed. A mineral right in one century. A transport corridor in another. A family that had held interests along the same route through 4 political systems. I stopped thinking of their wealth as money. They owned continuity. That was the difference. My modern group was valued at the equivalent of roughly 180 million US dollars after they applied conservative discounts. I had never seen 3 billion rand made to sound so small. Then they assessed my historical network. No reliable valuation. High relationship quality. Low dependence. Vast growth. Unusually strong local participation. Strategic southern access. An older woman from Ghana, named Amma, asked how I enforced exclusive trade. I do not. She looked at me. How do you stop local traders from using competitors? I do not. A man across the table smiled. His name was Malik. He represented one of the larger settlement houses. That does not scale. It already did. What keeps them loyal? Fair prices, reliable payment, shared infrastructure, information, trust. No debt dependence. No. No exclusive supply. No. Malik shook his head. Sentimental. I did not dislike him. He was not Musa. He was competent. His worldview was simply different. Malik believed control reduced risk. I believed too much control created hidden risk. Amma listened to both of us, then asked the question that changed the next year of my life. What happens when your network experiences a shortage large enough that loyalty is no longer enough? I already knew the answer. Because it was happening. Grain prices in Lindy's network rose 22% in 9 days. Then another 11%. Families began selling cattle. Some traders started holding back grain because they expected prices to rise further. That created the exact feedback loop I feared. Scarcity raised prices. Rising prices encouraged hoarding. Hoarding made scarcity worse. The exchange knew about the situation. Malik approached me with an offer. 200 million rand, equivalent in emergency financing. Excellent terms. Much better than I could have received from any normal bank. In return, his settlement house would receive priority participation in my southern route for 10 years. I read the agreement twice. It was not predatory. That made it more dangerous to my thinking. The old Nandi would have accepted immediately. Cheap capital. Limited risk. Preserved liquidity. Perfect. Then I imagined becoming dependent on one settlement house to solve every future problem. I declined. Malik did not look offended. You plan to fund the shortage yourself? Yes. You may lose hundreds of millions. Yes. You understand opportunity cost. I used to be a financial analyst. Then I am surprised. So am I. We did not flood the past with modern grain. That would have been easy. It also could have destroyed local farming. Instead, Lindy mapped existing reserves. We paid to move grain from areas with surplus. We repaired storage. We offered guarantees to traders who released stock instead of hoarding it. We introduced modern food only when local supply could not cover minimum needs. I created a support pool of 110 million rand. Tandy nearly dropped her phone. 110 million. Yes. For a market that cannot appear in our financial statements. It appears in mine. That does not make me feel better. She helped anyway. Because Tandy's preferred method of showing loyalty was complaining while solving your problem. The shortage lasted months. Our profit margins collapsed. My accountants wanted explanations. Modern staff thought we had suffered unexpected cost increases in rural supply programs. Technically true. Then something interesting happened. Historical trade volume began recovering faster than expected. Families that had not been forced to sell productive cattle were still producing. Artisans had kept working. Farmers who received storage support retained more grain. Traders trusted our guarantees. The 110 million had not disappeared. It had preserved the productive base of an economy. Lindy said it better. You did not buy grain. What did I buy? Tomorrow. I wrote that down. The exchange noticed. Malik noticed too. He did not apologize for doubting me. He updated his model. That was the moment I began respecting him. Our route was upgraded. Then a larger problem appeared. 2 other door networks failed during a settlement cycle. Nobody knew why. One route simply stopped opening. Another became unstable. That left obligations worth almost 600 million US dollars, needing to clear through alternative participants. Normally, the largest settlement houses would handle it. Amma proposed something different. Give Nandi the southern tranche. I thought I had misheard. The amount assigned to my network was $140 million equivalent. Not all cash. Commodity obligations. Storage rights. Modern currency. Trade credits. Delivery guarantees. But the total exposure was larger than my comfortable liquid capacity. Malik looked at me. You can refuse. I knew. That was why I accepted. I wanted to know whether my power was real. Not the doorway. Not the early gold. Not luck. The financial structure I had built. The first plan I created was terrible. I intended to sell several modern equity positions. Lindy listened. These companies give you money. Yes. Every year. Yes. And you want to sell them. To raise cash. So you are selling cattle because you are hungry at lunch. I rubbed my face. Please stop using livestock to explain finance. It works. Unfortunately, it did. My assets were good. Selling them to solve a temporary settlement problem was weak capital management. The answer was netting. We mapped everything. Who owed us? Who did we owe? What could be settled in goods instead of cash? Could storage obligations be exchanged for transport? Could a historical commodity credit offset a modern receivable through an exchange intermediary? My $140 million obligation became 112. Then 96. Then 81. Then 74. I could handle 74. Barely. Then one historical delivery failed. Heavy rain made a river crossing impossible. The goods would arrive 4 days late. Our deadline was 36 hours away. The new shortfall was equivalent to $14 million. Malik called. My credit line remains available. I know. Use it. Not yet. Nandi, independence and stupidity are not the same thing. I almost hung up. Then I realized he was right. That annoyed me more. My refusal to borrow had become emotional. Musa had weaponized credit against me. The bank had nearly taken my grandmother's property. Somewhere inside me, borrowing still felt like surrender. That was not financial logic. That was fear wearing a suit. I went through the doorway and told Lindy. She listened. If you borrow from Malik, what happens? I pay interest. Does he own you? No. Can he take the shop? No. Can he control us? Not under this facility. Then why are you angry? I did not answer. She understood anyway. You are fighting Musa. He is not involved. I know. That hurt. I prepared to use Malik's short-term facility. Then Tandy called. Do not sign yet. Why? One of our retail customers will prepay a large receivable at a discount. How much? Just under $10 million equivalent. We are still short. I know, keep listening. One of our storage subsidiaries owed capacity to another group. That group needed transport more urgently. Our transport company had unused capacity. Three-way substitution. Storage for transport. Receivable advanced for cash. Historical credit shifted against a later delivery. The final shortfall vanished. 30 minutes before the deadline, the report showed. Cash used, $67.8 million equivalent. Assets sold, 0. Emergency borrowing, 0. Obligations cleared, 100%. I sent the confirmation. Then I walked outside behind my grandmother's shop and sat down on the loading step. I was exhausted. Lindy appeared with a bowl. What is that? Food. I am not hungry. That is how I know you need it. At the exchange meeting the following week, Amma placed the settlement report on the table. Nobody clapped. This was finance. People did not clap unless someone rang a bell. Malik read the report. I expected you to borrow. So did I. You probably should have. Probably. He laughed. Amma looked around the table. The important result is not that Nandi had enough money. She tapped the report. She made separate companies behave like one balance sheet. That was the moment the room changed. I had felt it before. When Musa saw me at the lender meeting. When banks stopped treating me like a small borrower. When suppliers realized they needed us more than we needed them. Recalculation. The old houses stopped seeing me as someone who had found a profitable doorway. They saw infrastructure. My settlement tier was upgraded. Our southern network gained direct counterparty access. Then a Shah handed me an old file. My grandmother's name was written on the cover. I stopped breathing for a second. You found it. Part of it. Inside were trade records from more than 30 years earlier. Volumes. Goods. Settlement notes. My grandmother had not merely known about the doorway. She had been excellent at this. Then, suddenly, the record stopped. The final sheet contained one sentence in her handwriting. Do not let them turn the door into a chain. I read it twice. Asha watched me. What do you think it means? I do not know. That was true. But for the first time, I had an idea. My grandmother had not walked away because she failed. She had walked away because she discovered a kind of success she refused to accept. The answer came from Lindy. A group of unfamiliar traders arrived asking for access to our goods. Their prices were extraordinary. They offered gold, cattle, production rights, long-term purchase guarantees. At first, I thought we had found excellent new customers. Lindy refused them. Why? They asked the wrong questions. What questions? Not what we have. She looked at me. What we cannot live without. That sentence made my stomach drop. Essential goods mapping. Find what a community cannot function without. Offer it cheaply. Allow local habits and production to reorganize around your supply. Then control it. I had seen the same strategy in modern business. Platforms, suppliers, software, finance. Dependency made customers predictable. Predictable customers could be priced. The traders were connected to a smaller exchange house operating through an eastern route. Not Malik's group, not Ashaz, but recognized. I reported the situation to Amma. She was not surprised enough. Is this allowed? Not prohibited. That was not my question. The exchange rules focus on major historical disruption. So deliberate economic dependency is acceptable. Sometimes. There it was. My grandmother's sentence. Do not let them turn the door into a chain. The exchange was not evil. That would have made things simple. Its rules existed because time-linked trade could cause disasters. Wars. Technological contamination. Political collapse. Disease. Massive economic shocks. The old families had built controls to prevent the worst outcomes. But their ethics were designed around protecting the network, not necessarily protecting every person living inside a market. I understood why my grandmother had closed the door. I also understood why I could not simply copy her. My route was visible now. If I disappeared, someone else would come. So I proposed a Southern Access standard. No deliberate below-cost dumping, intended to eliminate essential local production. No exclusive control over staple food supply. No emergency debt agreements transferring productive land. No contracts designed to make one community dependent on one doorway. Transparent terms. Local representation. Independent dispute review. Malik read the first draft. This is impossible to define consistently. Then help define it. You are asking the exchange to regulate strategy. I am asking it to regulate dependency. Dependency is subjective. Concentration risk is not. That is a modern corporate measure. Households have concentration risk too. We argued for 3 hours. He identified loopholes. I fixed them. Asha added language, preventing fake local representatives from being created by traders. Amma insisted that any rule without economic consequences was decoration. So I added consequences. Networks violating the standard would lose access to Southern settlement infrastructure. At first, that sounded ridiculous. My infrastructure was tiny compared with the exchange. Then people examined our growth. Nandi holdings had expanded. Our logistics network had doubled. Our settlement volume had tripled. Lindy's historical system had become unusually reliable because it did not depend on my personal presence. Our route was becoming valuable. For the first time, I understood a level of power beyond money. I did not need to be richer than the old families. I needed to control something they valued. Position, access, reliability, trust. That was leverage. The third version of the standard passed provisionally. Malik voted against version 1. He voted for version 3. That mattered. He had not become my enemy. He had become something better. A capable person who disagreed with me and could still change his mind. The traders who had approached Lindy withdrew. No confrontation. No threats. Their business model simply became less attractive under the new rules. Meanwhile, Lindy's cooperative expanded. More communities joined. Women who once participated quietly in household trade now negotiated bulk agreements. Emergency grain reserves were maintained locally. Artisans had shared storage. Traders published reference prices through Lindy's network. Not fixed prices. Information. That alone reduced exploitation. One afternoon, a cattle trader arrived offering 200 animals. 2 years earlier, that transaction would have overwhelmed us. Lindy asked 3 questions. Rejected his price. He protested. She shrugged. Sell elsewhere. He stared at her, then agreed to her terms. I watched from the doorway. That was rude. She smiled. You taught me. I taught you negotiation. You taught me to leave. That was true. The ability to walk away had always been the foundation of my real power. Musa controlled my future because losing one salary once meant disaster. The bank frightened me because losing one property once meant losing everything. Now no single customer defined me. No single lender. No single supplier. No single investor. No single market. Lindy had built the same kind of power. No single trader could isolate her. No single family could dictate terms. No single shortage could destroy the network. We had both become difficult to own. By then, Nandi Holdings was valued above 9 billion rand. Still small by exchange standards. But the southern route had become one of the fastest-growing networks in its class. At the next annual gathering, I no longer sat with observers. I had a voting seat. Amma showed me a secure archive room. Inside was a wall-sized digital map layered over older records. Door networks. Time routes. Market links. Africa filled the display. Zanzibar. West Africa. North Africa. The Horn. Southern routes. Then the map expanded. Asia. Europe. The Americas. Island networks. Routes that opened only during certain seasons. Routes lasting minutes. Routes nobody fully understood. My doorway was 1 point. My 9 billion rand business was impressive. Against that map, it was nothing. Asha stood beside me. You are quiet. I am recalculating. She smiled. Can your glowing machine handle it? Lindy told you that. She tells everyone. I stared at the map. For most of my life, I thought wealth meant security. Then freedom. Then ownership. Then influence. Now I saw another level. Scale. The exchange itself did not control every door. Some routes refused membership. Some had their own rules. Some destinations were unknown. There were markets beyond the network that had just made my billions feel small. For the first time in years, I understood exactly how little I knew. I expected fear. Instead, I felt the same thing I had felt staring at that first 22,000 rand payment in my car. Possibility. 3 years after the night, I almost sold my grandmother's shop. I drove there alone. I still owned it. Of course I did. Nandi Holdings had offered to turn it into something impressive. I refused. We repaired the roof, strengthened the walls, added security. That was enough. The original wooden counter remained. The shelves remained. The old storeroom looked completely normal during the day. At 8:14 that evening, the doorway appeared. Lindy walked through without knocking. She wore clothing made partly from businesses she now controlled. Not mine. Hers. That distinction made me happier than almost anything else. She had become wealthy in her own world. But wealth was not the best part. She had become difficult to exclude. Families wanted her advice. Traders wanted access to her network. Artisans negotiated through the cooperative. Communities maintained their own reserves. She still used beads. I still complained. Neither of us planned to change. How was your meeting? She asked. Long. Did the rich people argue? Yes. Did you win? That is not how meetings work. So no. I got most of what I wanted. She smiled. Then yes. On the modern side, Muse's old company survived. I sold most of the debt position later at a profit. Musa faced civil claims connected to the supplier scheme. For a while, I followed every development. Then I stopped. That surprised me. There had been a time when I thought justice meant watching every consequence. Instead, his life became boring. He was no longer connected to mine. That felt better. Tandy became Chief Operating Officer of Nandi Holdings. She bought a house close enough to mine that she could arrive uninvited and criticize how I parked. My mother finally accepted that I was wealthy after I paid off her home. She still asked whether my companies were stable. I told her yes. She suggested I keep my CV updated anyway. Some risk controls are hereditary. Malik and I eventually became partners on 2 exchange projects. We still disagreed. He believed I underestimated how efficient control could be. I believed he underestimated how valuable voluntary loyalty could become. Both projects made money. Asha continued appearing without appointments. I eventually told reception to stop pretending she needed one. Amma became something close to a mentor, though she would have denied it. And my grandmother's records became an obsession. I eventually recovered enough files to understand most of what she had done. She operated the doorway for 9 years. She traded carefully, built strong local relationships, refused several high-margin dependency deals, then walked away after another exchange house proposed, making one historical community permanently dependent on imported essentials. She did not destroy the doorway. She preserved it. Maybe for me. Maybe for anyone who came next. I would never know. The financial analyst in me hated uncertainty. I had learned to tolerate a few things I could not value. The dependency standard we created spread to 3 other regional networks. Not because everyone suddenly became kind. Because the results became measurable. Networks with stronger local counterparties had fewer defaults. Less emergency intervention. More stable trade volumes. Better long-term profitability. Fairness, it turned out, could produce excellent risk-adjusted returns. I enjoyed that fact far too much. By then, my personal wealth was far beyond anything I could have imagined when Musa fired me. But wealth itself no longer felt like the power. The real power was optionality. If one bank said no, I had 5 alternatives. If one supplier left, I had others. If one market weakened, I had other markets. If one powerful family disliked me, I could survive it. Nobody could easily force me to choose between obedience and survival anymore. That was what I had been chasing from the beginning. Not money. Independence. Enough independence to say no. That night, Lindy and I sat outside on her side of the doorway. Cattle moved in the distance. Children were laughing near the homesteads. A trader walked past, carrying one of the steel tools we had introduced years earlier. Once, seeing that would have made me feel important. Now it looked ordinary. Integrated. Just one useful tool inside an economy that no longer revolved around me. That made me proud. Lindy handed me a leather pouch. I opened it. Inside was a dark exchange token. Where did this come from? A trader. Which trader? She came from far north. How far? Lindy smiled. You always ask questions before food. That is not an answer. She says there is another door. I looked at her. Another route. No. She pointed at the token. She says this one does not open into your time. I stopped moving. What does that mean? She does not know. 3 years earlier, I would have called that impossible. I had retired that word. Lindy continued. The people there use money nobody recognizes. Their cloth is strange. Their tools are strange. They know the symbol from your floor. I looked down at the token. I had spent most of my life trying to become financially secure. When Musa framed me, I thought power meant having enough money that nobody could fire me. When I saved the shop, I thought power meant owning my home. When I became a millionaire, I thought power meant cash. When I became a billionaire, I thought power meant assets. When I entered the exchange, I thought power meant scale. I had been right every time. And incomplete every time. Lindy watched me smiling. What? I think we found another market. You already have too many. That has never stopped us. She sighed. You are going to make another spreadsheet. Obviously. She stood. At least eat first. I slipped the token into my pocket. Behind us, my grandmother's doorway glowed inside the old storeroom. Once, it had been my escape from poverty. Then my business. Then my network. Then my path into an economy larger than anything I had imagined. Now another horizon was opening. Maybe another century. Maybe another history. Maybe something stranger. For the first time, I did not feel any need to rush. I had companies, warehouses, capital, partners, experience, people I trusted. More importantly, I finally understood what my grandmother had tried to preserve. Money can buy safety. Ownership can buy independence. Scale can buy influence. But if your power depends on making everyone around you weaker, you are not building wealth. You are building a chain. I had spent 3 years breaking every chain that had once controlled me. Musa, the bank, my own fear of debt, my fear of being poor again, even my need to prove that I could survive alone. Whatever waited beyond the next door might contain people richer than me. Older networks, bigger markets, financial systems I did not understand. That no longer frightened me, because there is a difference between being poor and being early. Poor means you have no options. Early means the options have not been priced yet. I followed Lindy toward the lights of the settlement, already calculating what questions I would ask the trader in the morning. For most of my life, I thought becoming powerful meant reaching the point where nobody could take anything from me. I was wrong. Real power was reaching the point where the world could become bigger without making me smaller. And somewhere beyond our maps, another market was waiting. This time, I was ready to negotiate.